Let's take a look at a couple of tips for troubleshooting IP. Whenever you want communication to take place between two devices, what I always like to do is I always like to do what's called a common box. If two devices are going to communicate up to layer 3, they're going to communicate up to layer 3. There must be something in common at layers 1, layer 2, and layer 3. Each device must have something in common at layer 1 to be able to communicate. What they must have in common at layer 1 is a common media. Now, inherent to the concept of a common media is the fact that they will have a common bandwidth or a common clock rate, a common rate of communication. So, built in here would be the concept of bandwidth. So, in order for two devices to talk, two of these routers to talk at layer 1, a clock rate would have to be set on that serial interface. So, we've got that clock rate at layer 1. So clock rate would have to be set, and assuming that that clock rate is set and that the media is connected, you should have communication at layer 1. At layer 2, both devices must have a common encapsulation or common frame type. Encapsulation and frame type are synonymous. So in order for communication to take place here, the encapsulation must be the same. The default encapsulation on a serial link, of course, is HDLC. So that's why we mentioned before HDLC and PPP. If one device, though, is using PPP and the other device is using HDLC, of course, you're not going to have communication up to layer 2. You might have communication at layer 1, but not up to layer 2. At layer 3, if two devices are going to communicate, they must have a common network ID. If you want two devices to communicate, two of these routers to communicate directly at layer 3, you'll have to have a common network ID. This is that IP address. This is where the IP address must be set properly. So, in troubleshooting, you would go back to this common box to make sure that if there's a problem with any of the communication, that you check to make sure that all three of these things are in common, or set in common. So how would we check that clock rate? Well, the way we would check the clock rate would be to do the show controllers command on the router. Show controllers serial 0. That checks to see the type of cable as well as whether it's DCE or DTE, as well as whether the clock rate has been set. If the clock rate has not been set on one of these devices attempting to communicate, then the clock rate must be set before layer 1 communication can take place. At layer 2, as we mentioned, the encapsulation must be the same. By default, it's HDLC. But also, you have to be sure that we issue the no shut command. No shutdown on the interface to enable the interface. If the interface is not enabled, you will not have communication at layer 2. So layer 1, show controllers, and then layer 2, you can do a show run. That will show you whether the interface is shut down, or you could do a show IP interface brief. Remember, that gives you a summary of all of the interfaces. You could also do a show interface serial 0 and view the interface itself to verify whether the interface is up or down. At layer 3, to troubleshoot here, you would use commands such as ping, packet inter-network groper. So you would ping the IP address that you're expecting to see at the other end there. Or you can do a trace command, trace the IP address to verify communication to the other end. Trace is going to give you back the IP addresses of every router or every hop that the packet has to traverse or has to go through in order to get to the end device that you're attempting to communicate with. So you can do a ping, you can do a trace, and this, of course, you would be able to verify. This way you'd be able to verify communication to the other device. If you're not sure as to whether your TCP/IP is even configured properly on your own device, of course, remember you could do a ping to the loopback interface, ping 127.1.1.1 or anything with 127 there. You'd be able to ping and test to the loopback interface. So that's a look at a couple of troubleshooting tips that you can use for troubleshooting your IP network. You can use ping, trace, you can use your show commands, and of course, the common box. Make sure that there's common media between the devices. Make sure that both devices have a common encapsulation. And at layer 3, that both devices have a common network ID.